what is virtual reality? Because there's VR, there's AR, there's a whole bunch of people out there talking about all kinds of things, right? In my mind, what I work on and what I produce is experiences that are immersive experiences. You put on a headset of some kind and you're transported to another world where you are in that 360-degree world, right? That's what I'm talking about when I talk about virtual reality. And what's happening in the market right now, I was in the 3D world for a while, so my career is sort of doomed to go into increasingly tighter niches. But what happens in any kind of technology market when a new tech first comes out is you see two things happen. On one side, you see people that do things very well and are very good at what they do, but I call them the secret sauce brigade, which is people that you don't really see, they don't reveal what they do, they don't talk about what they do, but you just give them money and something comes out, right? And then on the other hand are what I call the tinfoil hat wearers, people that raise their hand and say, oh, we can do it, and then when you show up, it's like, oh my God, you know? And what separates technology that is accepted from technology that is not accepted are two things. Number one, the quality of content, obviously, and number two, the creation of a systematized production workflow. Being able to just treat it like a production that has line item budgets, things that people recognize when they're doing production. And that's what I'm very focused on. When I shoot virtual reality with my crews, they are not custom rigs. I mean, they are custom rigs, but they're built at a rental house as part of a rental package, right? They're not proprietary rigs. I crank out stitch dailies in 24 hours, visual effects, audio, editorial, delivery, the whole thing that clients understand, right? So the purpose of this talk is to talk about demystifying VR. And for me, that is, I wanted to take a few minutes and walk you through sort of all the steps that are necessary in creating virtual reality production, all right? So that it takes, you at least know what needs to be done. Those individual steps can still be hard, but you at least know what needs to be done. And I like to start with the end goal, which is delivery and distribution. Because these are the things that a lot of people know about right now and a lot of people hear about, right? So, at NAB is the only place that you're going to find guys walking around with Oculus Rifts in their backpack, right? So there are three, headsets are going to become a commodity. It seems like every week there's somebody releasing a new headset of some kind. But right now, there are three big headset deliverables that you can actually go buy right now, that you can get right now. Despite what everybody's announcing, there are three things you can go get right now. One of them is the Samsung Gear VR, which of course I left mine in my hotel room, otherwise I'd hold that up as well. A Gear VR looks like that guy up top. It's a white injection molded plastic headset with a little micro USB port on it. And then you have a Galaxy Note 4 cell phone that plugs into that. And when it plugs in, it launches an app that then you look at stuff in VR, right? Now, one thing that people get confused about is that people hear Oculus and they're Gear VR and they think those two are combined. And they sort of are, because the hardware is Samsung. It's a headset and a Galaxy Note 4, that's all Samsung. But when you launch the virtual reality experience, you are launching the Oculus app. All right, so the software within the Gear VR is Oculus. The headset and the hardware is Samsung. So that's how the two are connected, all right? And and Oculus, as everybody probably knows if you're sitting here, Oculus was acquired for $2 billion by Facebook a little while ago. So, and I have absolutely no inside knowledge of this, but I guarantee you that sometime within the next 6 months, if you have an Oculus account, you're going to log on to your Facebook page and somebody's going to try to link the two so that you're seeing all your social updates when you're in VR, because that's what everybody wants to do, I guess. So, the Samsung Gear VR also has its own SDK, it also has its own development environment, so you can create Gear VR apps. I have teams that are really good at creating Gear VR apps. And a Gear VR app is just an Android app that's sort of wrapped in the Gear VR development environment, so that when you launch a Gear VR app, it says, oh, okay, please put this into the Gear VR headset. And you put it in, and then instead of the Oculus app, you're in your own app, all right? So within the Oculus app, though, are then, to make it sort of a little more confusing, within the Oculus app are individual ways of getting content. So there's actually an app store, there's a video store, there's an ecosystem within the Oculus app that lets you get VR content onto the Gear VR headset. So it's Samsung hardware, Oculus software, and then individual content developers that are delivering to the Oculus app to be delivered through the Gear VR headset. Everybody got that? All right, great. Then there's Google Cardboard. And Google Cardboard is exactly what it looks like. It is a fold-up piece of cardboard that you put a phone into, you snap it up, and it's a ViewMaster, right? It's a VR ViewMaster. That's all it is. And the distribution methodology for that is the Google Play Store. If you go to the Google Play Store, if you have an Android phone and you go to the Google Play Store right now and search for virtual reality, there are more than 100 VR apps in Google Play right now. There's more than 50 apps in the iOS App Store. Virtual reality is an environment and an ecosystem that's just out there waiting, right? And then there's the Oculus Rift, which is this guy right here, which started this whole thing, right? And the Oculus Rift it very clearly says on it, development kit. Right? This was never meant to be a consumer product. Although the world has sort of exploded around it, this was never meant to be a consumer product. It's a development kit, and that's why it looks all bulky and weird, and because it's not meant to be used by consumers. Nevertheless, it's out there, and there are a lot of them out there, and you can still buy them. The difference between Cardboard and Gear VR and the Rift is obviously that this is tethered. This is not an independent mobile experience that comes through your cell phone. It's tethered to a laptop or what have you. So those are the devices. Now how do you get stuff, right? So when you open up the Gear VR, the first thing you see is that navigation interface there in your headset, and it lets you click on, there's a little mouse pad on the right side of the Gear VR that lets you tap on stuff, and when you move your head, there's a cursor that you see moving in that window. So you put your cursor on something and you tap, and that's a mouse selection, right? And it reinforces that with a little electric shock. Now, so basically, see how it says 360 photos and cinema there? You put your cursor on that, and then you tap, and it goes into that menu, and then there's individual pieces of content, and you can tap on that to look at the individual pieces of content, and off you go. And then there's also a store in there. You can't spend money yet because Samsung is still just trying to build the ecosystem, but there's obviously a store in there where you can download apps, you can download videos, you can download all sorts of different experiences that are meant to be experienced by Gear VR. And there's a thing called Milk VR. About, I don't know, 4 months ago or so, Samsung released a content ecosystem called Milk, all right? And there's Milk video, there's Milk audio, there's a whole bunch of Milk stuff. And one of the things is also Milk VR, which is the VR part of the Milk content ecosystem for Samsung. So, one more time, you're delivering content into Milk VR, which is a Samsung delivery ecosystem within the Oculus app to be delivered by the Samsung Gear VR headset. All right, everybody got that? Great. All right, because everything should be easy. Google Cardboard, like I mentioned, is just the Google Play Store. If you want to download, you can build Android apps, you can download the SDK for free for Google Cardboard, build VR apps, get them onto the Google Play Store, and then that's it. And then you're done, right? And then when you launch your app, that SDK that you're developing for Google Cardboard expects you to have a Google Cardboard viewer or something that splits the eyes and lets you see stuff, right? And because it's just cardboard also, there are companies out there, I know 3 companies right now that I can call that are doing custom, branded, logoed pieces of cardboard that you can have your own branded, it's like swag at a trade show floor. Here's your, B&H Google Cardboard viewer, right? And then, for the Rift DK2, even though this is a piece of development, it's called the development kit. For the Rift DK2, there is a site called Oculus VR, the Share site within the Oculus VR website, and it's yet another ecosystem that you can download apps and experiences that are specifically meant for the Oculus headset and will not work on any other headset. Okay, and if you want to become a developer for the Oculus, you can go to developer.oculusvr.com, sign up as a developer, and then you can download the SDKs and build these experiences yourself. So that's how VR gets to people. That's how you look at it, right? So, stepping backwards, because I'm stepping back from delivery and distribution all the way backwards to acquisition. So then you've got your headset, right? Well, what are you looking at? You're looking at video. I mean, you're just looking, if I gave you a Rift or a Gear VR and you were looking at a piece of video, you're just looking at an MP4 file, right? It's just an MP4 that's loaded into the Gear VR headset and then is played through a special player that formats it for VR. Just like there's a Flash player in HTML5, this is a VR player, but it's just a player that's playing back an MP4 file. And it's playing back something called equirectangular, which is actually a format, it's a standard. It's a standard that's been out there for 15 or 20 years. It's how planetariums are delivered. It's called full dome. right? So, and this is typically how dome experiences and planetarium video files are delivered. The common parlance is lat long as well. That's how it looks. That's how a piece of video, that's how that MP4 looks. It is an MP4 that is a flat raster that's showing that, all right? And what that is, this is a piece that I produced, I don't know, a couple of months ago. This is an 18-piece a cappella Indian choir at Ocean Way Recording in LA, right? So what's going on is that this is a Mercator projection. That's all that file is, right? If you look at it, that file is meant to be, if you take a Mercator projection, how that's meant to be viewed is on a globe. You take that, wrap it around your head, and pinch the top and bottom, it's a globe, right? And that's exactly what that is. If you take a look at that file, see how the bottom is stretched out on the carpet, and see how the top is way stretched out? That file is meant to be, here's your headset, you're looking at this file, it's meant to wrap around your head and then be wrapped around a globe. So it's a raster file, it's an MP4 with just an unusual geometry that's presented within that MP4 file, okay? And that on the left side, your left, on the left side is meant to connect to the right side so that when you're actually in the headset and you look around, there are singers all around you.
Are they in fact all around you when you're shooting?
They are. They are in fact all around. Well, they're not. They're around the rig. They're around the VR acquisition rig, which I'll get to in a minute. All right. So it's a Mercator projection. It's called lat long, and that's what the Rift. That's what all the devices use. That's what the Rift uses. The Samsung Gear VR and Google Cardboard. If you're delivering video projects to VR, that's what you're delivering. You're delivering an MP4 in a different resolution that has the projection of lat long within the MP4. But it's important to remember that it's just an MP4. Okay. And of course, then audio, because video without audio is just surveillance. So audio, for me, one thing that you've got to remember is that audio in a virtual reality space, and this is actually, there's less research being done on this. This is a less advanced world than the video world. Think about it for a minute. You're in a virtual reality world, right? My friend Corey here is playing guitar in front of me. When you wear headphones and you're listening to just a normal presentation, if there's a guitar right there, when I turn my head, I'm wearing headphones. That guitar moves with me. That audio world moves with me. If you're in virtual reality, that completely breaks the illusion, right? If you're looking at Corey playing guitar and you turn your head and his guitar moves over here and now you're looking at a trombone player and he's playing guitar, that's not right. The guitar has to stay there. So when you're looking around, the audio world remains fixed. And that's done in some very specific ways. There are specific microphones that record what are called tetrahedral or binaural, all right? So those are examples of two devices that I've used on shoots. On your left is what's called a binaural. That whole dummy head is what's called a binaural microphone. It's a very expensive microphone. And if you think about it, what a binaural microphone does is, if you close your eyes, you know that I'm talking in front of you. You only have two microphones, but you know that I'm talking in front of you because the frequency response, micro-frequency delays within the physiology of your ear hit your eardrum at certain times and are interpreted by your brain. That's how you can tell that something, with your eyes closed, that something is going from there to there, even though you only have two microphones in your head. It's the frequencies that are hitting your eardrums and translated by your brain into directionality, right? So that binaural head has two very high quality microphones buried in the ears of that dummy head that are acting as eardrums. So it's recording just two channels. It's just recording left and right, but it's recording left and right acoustically modeled by the head, the neck, and the ears that is in. So that when you play that back with what's called, you have to process it through what's called an HRTF, a head-related transfer function, because as it turns out, people's heads are different. And if you play back, for instance, and there are certain models, there's in general, women's heads are this way and men's heads are this way, and you apply a head-related transfer function, and when you play it back and it's right, it's magical, because you're just listening to a stereo file, but it's directional and you can hear everything. So that's number one. Number two is with that gizmo over on the right side, which is what's called a tetrahedral microphone. A tetrahedral microphone records 4 capsules typically pointing off in different directions, and then you record those 4 files into what's called B format, which is something that the BBC came up with a long time ago to do something that everybody has forgotten about, and then now it's all of a sudden relevant again. And from B format, you can extract anything. You can extract 5.1, 7.1, stereo, mono, whatever, right? So what you do, there's an example of the dummy head wearing Gear VR. All right, so then what you do is, what I've done, what I'm in the middle of doing for a couple of different projects is we've used a tetrahedral microphone. There's a brand new tetrahedral microphone on the market from, actually that company, Audeze, AUDEZE.com. They're a very high-end headphone company that's now about to release microphones, and they've built a tetrahedral microphone that is way beyond anything on the market right now, and I was lucky enough to be the first guy to use it. So you record with that tetrahedral microphone, and that gives you, for lack of a better way to put it, 360-degree room tone, right? So you record your 360-degree audio environment, and then in mixing and sound design, you can record lavs, you can record point sources, and make those point sources move within that 360-degree world. So that then when you encapsulate that within 5.1 or whatever the Samsung Gear VR, whatever those output devices have, at that point then the illusion is complete. You have a video file that you're looking around in, and you have an audio file that remains fixed within that 360-degree world. And that world is changing every day, but the Gear VR right now, you can deliver that 360-degree audio in one of two ways, either 5.1 or what's called quad binaural, right? Quad binaural is that binaural file that I talked about, which is left and right, but it's 4 of them, at 0, 90, 180, and 270 degrees, and the SDK for the Gear VR pans them as you're moving around. So it respects the gyroscopy of the phone, and when I look here, I'm listening to those 2 audio files, and as I turn my head, the SDK is doing this and fading between those binaural tracks to create the illusion of 360 degrees. It's a pain in the neck. It's a pain, but that's how it's done. So that's audio, which I was an audio geek in a previous lifetime, so I can talk a lot about that. So then, how do you do video? How do you actually post-produce this stuff, right? First thing you have to do is stitch it. Because what happens is, let me just fast forward a bit. What happens is you have these rigs. This is actually the rig this is one of the rigs that I used last weekend at Mandalay Bay, all right? So what happens is that you have this rig, or you have that rig, right? Those are 2, I used a GoPro rig and a Red rig at Mandalay Bay last weekend. So you have that, or you have that, and you record a whole bunch of separate and distinct video streams that then have to get stitched into that that have to be turned into that Mercator projection of some kind. So what do? The first thing that you do is you stitch those files together. You have several individual files that represent different pieces of that 360-degree world. You have to import those files into some piece of software and map them into a unified whole that you can then output in this lat-long format. And those are a couple of programs that do this, right? There's a company called Color, KOLOR.com. Color has the one in the top left-hand corner, Auto Pano Video. Auto Pano Video is a program that all it does is stitch video. You import video tracks in, you do stuff to them, and you put them into a globe, and then it outputs a lat-long format. But what it's doing, what Auto Pano Video is doing, is actually using algorithms from the tool in the upper right-hand corner, PT GUI. PT GUI has been around for a long time. It's something that panoramic photographers have been using for a long time. It's a tool that stitches stills. It's meant for creating gigapans and 360-degree panoramic photography. So what happens with Auto Pano Video is it has a very nice GUI for outlining video, but what happens in the background when you say go is it's rendering out a still file sequence, sending it to a PT GUI, sending it to PT GUI basically, letting PT GUI assemble a whole bunch of still files, and then bringing it back into Auto Pano Video to play back the video, right? Because PT GUI has been around for a long time and it's very good at what it does. Lower left-hand corner, every visual effects artist go-to tool, Nuke. Nuke has a lot of different tools for doing stitching and for outputting stitching. And then on the right-hand side, bottom right-hand, is Video Stitch, another tool that is specifically designed to stitch video. And this is right now. I mean, there are new tools coming out in the VR world almost every day, and we're at the place where probably by Thursday afternoon this is going to be outdated. Okay. So then you have great. Now you've done a stitch. Then what? Great. You have this file, this weird looking file, and then what? Well, at that point, it's just an MP4, right? So then you just go through a traditional post-production process. And those are the three tools that I use and that most of my teams use. For editorial, everybody has their poison, right? I'm a Premiere guy. Some people like Final Cut, some people like Avid. Doesn't matter, right? Because it's just an MP4 file. What you have to get used to in your head, though, it's a different kind of editorial. You have to get used to in your head of looking at that stitched file and realizing that when you put on the headset, you're really just doing a pan and scan within that stitched file, right? There's that Mercator projection, and you're looking at a window, and as you look up, down, and around, that's what you're doing. And I've got a couple of presets in Premiere that's just simple presets, right? But are presets that are like a window within that file, so I can sort of, kind of, get an idea, right? But it's just another kind of editorial. I was in the 3D world for a while. I know people who edit 3D videos, the 3D films, that can look at that can look at an anaglyph MP4 and judge depth really well by looking at an anaglyph and seeing how that anaglyph evolves over the course of a file. It's just another skill, okay? I do work for Assimilate. Assimilate has a product called Scratch, and Scratch, the reason that Scratch is up there, besides my association with the company, is that it is the only tool right now that can do live color correction and compositing and editorial to a Rift, all right? So that's hugely important, because without that, then when you're getting into the color and finishing portion of a program, then you're back into the thing of, you do something, you render it, you look at it, crap, and then you go back, render the whole thing, look at it, render, and instead of doing that, you have the ability to do this. This is a color correction session that I set up for a film that went to Sundance called Kaiju Fury. It was a virtual reality film that was in Sundance, and that's the live color correction session for that VR film. The guy sitting wearing the headset is Ian Ian Williams. He's the guy that won the visual effects for the Academy Award for VFX for Interstellar this past year, and he was one of the producers and directors on the project, right? So what was amazing about this, I was just a fly on the wall. I'm not the colorist and I'm not the client. What was cool about that is that I've been in hundreds of color sessions, right? And I was curious to see whether there's always a dynamic between the artist in the chair and the client, whatever you're doing, compositing, color, editorial, whatever. There's always this dynamic. And I was curious to see whether that dynamic would be broken by the fact that somebody was wearing a Rift. They spent the first 5 minutes sort of defining their language, and then after that I might as well have closed my eyes like any other color session that I've ever been in. And Scratch does a nice little thing that as the director is looking around, there's an orange dot on the screen for the colorist, so the colorist knows what the director is looking at. So the director turns around and goes, oh, can you make that a little more blue? Colorist knows what he's looking at and can make shapes and do what colorists do, right? Thanks, Corey. So that's, but other than that, it is a fairly normal post-production process. Now there is one thing that is very not normal about it, is that visual effects, doing visual effects in the 360 is hard and weird, okay? I have teams that I've assembled that I rely on that are experienced doing it and that do a very, very good job, but it's the old thing of just because you have a piano doesn't make you a pianist, right? There are people, anybody can download Nuke, but Nuke does different things in different people's hands. So being able to create visual effects in 360 degrees and making them right and making them so that they're believable when you put on the headset is hard, it just is. And then Pro Tools obviously for doing as the go-to tool for doing any kind of the tetrahedral or binaural mixing and delivering for that portion of virtual reality. So that's everything except the capture portion of it, right? That's distribution and delivery, the post-production pipeline, and now we get to the capture portion of it. And the capture portion of it is honestly the wild, wild west. It really is. Doing virtual reality right now, there is no such thing as a standard. Or another way of saying it is, standards are great, everybody should have one. Every single VR rig right now, every single one is some kind of either proprietary solution that you can't get a hold of unless you have a very close relationship with that company, or it's something that you design yourself, right? That's just nature of the beast. So, these are a couple of examples. Jaunt is a company that a lot of people are probably familiar with. They're building a rig They're building their own camera system. It's not available. You can't shoot with it unless you know John and are on their list, right? Upper right-hand corner is Samsung's Project Beyond camera, which same thing. It's alpha, beta level stuff. Nobody's really shooting with it. Lower left-hand corner is Next VR, but that's just a bunch of red dragons oriented in a slight. They're doing a whole other piece of technology that goes along with it, but their acquisition side is just reds oriented a very specific way. And then the lower right-hand corner is a company called Otoy, which has another kind of 360 camera, which I think they're releasing something at NAB that you can actually go out and buy and use. So that's on one end, and then on the other end is stuff like this, right? There are no shortage of different configurations of GoPros that you can buy, GoPro rigs that you can buy and put into some kind of configuration. 360 Heroes is probably the company that's the best known and probably the highest quality GoPro rigs that are out there right now. That's what I used for. The one on the right is a 360 Heroes rig that was hanging above the boxers last weekend, and I also used that 2 weekends ago for a shoot where I had a bunch of stunt guys shooting guns and stuff, and the GoPro rig was sort of following them around, right? And then on the left-hand side is just another version of a GoPro rig. And then the thing on the right-hand side is that if you're into virtual reality, you should buy one of those today. That's called a Ricoh Theta, R-I-C-O-H Theta. You can go to Amazon, buy one right now. It's about the size of an Apple remote, and it has a camera on each side. You push a button, and it communicates directly to your iPad, and in 5 seconds you have a panoramic photo that's stitched that you can look around and see. It shoots video too, very bad video, and the stitch is bad, but this is your location tool. This is your location scouting tool, and if you're into 360, it's $300, fits in your pocket, and you can take pictures, and it immediately streams them to your iPad, and you can send them to people with a free player, and they can look at them. Doesn't get any, that's the closest thing to a commercial product for VR that there is right now. And that's just cool. It's just cool, right? We were at we had several of them last weekend. We stepped in the middle. The DirecTV, the execs were there, and they don't want to see. They don't want to see that, right? That's hard. They don't want to see that, but we were able to step in the middle of the ring and go check this out and push a button, and then everybody looked at it on the iPad, and everybody's like, okay, our money is being well spent. So it was cool. So but building rigs is it's a custom thing right now. I really take the approach of that I look at a VR job as very much the way I'd look at doing a commercial or a music video or a feature film or anything else. It's a job, and you look at the requirements of the job and you build for the job. You don't, you're gonna get a different set of cameras if you're gonna go shoot a Soundgarden music video than if you are gonna shoot a Nike commercial. You're just gonna do it differently. Same thing for VR, right? That was boxing. So if you think about boxing for a minute, it's really not compelling in virtual reality. It's just not, right? Because you're going to put on the headset and you're going to look around, you're going to be in the arena, and that's cool. And then the rest of your time you're going to be focusing on a pin spot right there. That's the two people in the middle of the action that are not moving outside of a circle about that big, right? That is not a compelling use of the space. So we shot it so that if you look at it, there's no down camera, because nobody cares about down. There's nothing down. We just shot a plate, and we're going to comp it in later. It'll be great. There's 4 cameras. There's 0, 90, 180, 270, and one pointing up. The Hero camera that's on the Boxers was a really high quality. I think it was a 14mm prime. Everything else is a fisheye. That wouldn't work for any other shoot because it's a complete mismatch, right? But for this particular venue, it was the perfect thing to do because we know that our Hero stuff, which is never moving and it's always going to be right there on a fixed camera, the Hero stuff is always going to look great. And everything else is going to be stitched, and it's going to be the crowd, and here's what everybody's going to do. They're going to look around and go, oh look, crowd. Now I'm watching the Boxers, right? And also, this is being wrapped into an app experience so that they're going to be Jumbotrons sort of composited all around you, and there's going to be different camera angles on those Jumbotrons so that it's sort of the ultimate fan experience. But it's just the point of that every job is approached differently. We did that as a camera package from Keslo. My AC and DIT and designer put it together in a day and a half. We spec'd it out. They sat down and went, okay, what are we going to build? Spec'd it out, got a cheese plate, put it all together in a day and a half, brought it to Vegas. We got the rig put together in 3 hours in Vegas. We're ready to shoot. Then it went back to Keslo and got disassembled. It's a camera package, right? And that's the GoPro rig. The 360 Heroes rig on the right, that's a really cool little device because you just pop How? You just pop GoPros in it, turn them on, set them to go, and you're off to the races. And the way they designed that particular rig is really clever. The batteries and the batteries and the cards and the remote sensor, they're all in very easy places. It's just very clever, very well done. And I guess the last thing that I wanted to say and talk about before I take questions is that anybody that tells you that they know what they're doing in VR is wrong. There are very few rules right now. Everybody's trying to figure it out. Everybody's trying to figure out what to do and how to do it, right? I'm experienced in virtual reality production because I've been doing it for 6 months, and I'm doing. But I have a deep background in production and assembling teams and stuff like that. But if you know how to build the rigs, stitching, then the editorial audio, visual effects if you need to do visual effects, and then the delivery is the app ecosystem. So if you can put all those pieces together and assemble the teams to do all those pieces, then you can deliver really high quality VR right now. It can be hard, but there's no rocket science to it, and it's not proprietary, right? It just requires specialized skill sets with off-the-shelf tools, and you can be doing incredible experiences. It's a lot of fun, and when it's done right, it is something like nothing else you've ever seen before, right? And I love it. I'm a convert. I love the stuff, and it's also cool because if you think about it from a production point of view, it's the first format that's ever come around that everything has to be reshot. You can't repurpose existing footage in a VR world. Everything has to be reshot. So whatever your market is, go out and find it and go sell to them, right? I'm working right now with an architect firm, in Dallas, a big architecture firm in Dallas, that's doing a combination of 3D models and live walkthroughs of VR. We're building a custom application that's just for that firm, right? Because they want to use it to shorten their approval times, because anything that gets a client closer to a design shortens the approval cycle, and then as a sales tool. How cool is it as a sales tool for an architect to be able to do a walkthrough of a house that they built, and when a new client comes in, they give them a branded Google Cardboard headset and an app that they can go home and browse through all the houses. And that's just one tiny market. There's a billion of them out there, and everything has to be reshot. So I think the market, I personally believe the market is going to take off. One thing that I did not mention, which is important, there are right now more than 500,000 Gear VR units out there. That silly little cardboard thing has sold more than 1.5 million units of people buying folded cardboard to be delivered to them so they can assemble it. 1.5 million. And there are about 250,000 Oculus Rifts out there right now. The last time I looked at statistics that I believed, the Oculus Store, which is the lowest volume store of all of them out there, the Oculus Store had more than 1 million unique downloads from the Oculus VR Store. Google Play has more than 100 VR apps on it. The iOS Store has more than 50 VR apps on it. Samsung has announced 2 new VR delivery platforms over the past couple of weeks. This is a market, right? This is fundamentally different from, I hear a lot of people making comparisons to 3D. This is fundamentally different from 3D because the distribution device is your phone, and it's a qualitatively different experience. 3D is always a nice to have. I can't think of a single movie, and I worked professionally in 3D, I love 3D. I can't think of a single 3D movie that was such a fundamentally different experience in 3D that you can't see the 2D version. It just doesn't exist, right? It's always a nice to have. VR is a qualitatively different experience that you can't get any other way. And I knew it was going to be a market personally because I have a 15-year-old daughter, and she and her friends are my built-in focus group, right? So, and she's a geek by proxy because she's my daughter. So, I got her a Google Cardboard and showed it to her, and she was like, oh, that's cool, and downloaded, I don't know, Taylor Swift music video or something like that, showed it to her. She had a sleepover with a bunch of her friends, showed it to her friends thought it was cool. The next time I saw her friends and her all gathered together, 2 of her friends had Google Cardboards. I was like, that's a market, that's done. If you're appealing to kids and kids get it, it's a market. And then the other thing is that I like to say is that I've shown Gear VR and Oculus Rift demos to hundreds of people now, everybody from young kids to 90-year-olds, right? The one person that spent the most time without stopping in a Gear VR headset was my 76-year-old mother-in-law, right? She could not get enough of it. She absolutely loved it. So the appeal of this stuff is universal, cross-generational, and everybody loves it.